Are you thinking about a career transition? Well, what are some steps you might take to make it more successful? Here to talk with me about this is Amy Shepard from Sensible Money. Amy, welcome.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here and thanks for walking us through your article about the 3 steps needed for a successful career transition.
Yes, you are very welcome. So, this article came about actually because of a real life occurrence of mine. So, a few years ago, I had noticed I wasn't as happy in the job that I had had and really enjoyed for many years. We had some big changes, and I started to realize, okay, I need to do something new. At the time, I didn't really have a plan. I just knew I needed a change, and I started trying to figure it out. And then I realized at the end, once I ended up where I am today, I looked back and I realized, oh, okay, wow, there was a progression here. And so I thought, maybe if I document this, it can help other people who are also looking for a change and aren't really sure where to start.
Yeah. So, where to start?
Well, so for me, the first question I asked myself was, well, what would I do if I won the lottery? Trying to take the financial piece out of it and thinking of what is really going to make me happy. That was the question I asked. So when I thought to myself, if I won the lottery, money was no object, what would I want to do every day? And for me, that meant helping people with their money as a financial planner. That was my true north of what I really wanted to do. So that is step one. Take the money out of it and just think about what would you be doing if you didn't have to worry about finances.
Right. I mean, in your case, you obviously had background in that very business. You didn't have to go back to school or learn new skills or be retrained, right? I mean, it was a natural transition ultimately.
It was, yes. And for me, that was definitely, I think, made it a bit easier. I know some people, they are looking for a totally drastic change, wanting to change industries or do things where they do maybe need to go back to school. But I still think asking that question really does help you hone in on, what do you want to be doing?
Yeah. Okay. Step two.
Step two is a really interesting one, something I had never thought of before. But step two is think of where you want to be in 2 steps rather than where you want to be next. And that came from at my former company. We had gone through an acquisition and lots of change and integrations with different departments. And we had an executive leader come visit us at some point, and somebody asked a question, in a kind of town hall setting of career pathing, and his response was, don't think about where you want to be next. Think about where you want to be in 2 steps. If you can figure out where you want to be in 2 steps, that helps you know what the next step is to take. And I was like, had one of those light bulb moments. I was like, wow, that's actually super helpful because it helps you think more long term. And so if you think about where you want to be in 2 steps, then you can work backwards and figure out, okay, well, here's where I know I want to be in 2 steps. So what do I have to do to get there? And so that is step number two, is think 2 steps ahead.
It's great advice. Step three.
Step three is something really important to me. That is identifying your values. And so I have talked about that, I think, quite a bit with you, Bob, in different videos that we've done. But in the sense of a career transition, I approached it a little bit differently. So I have my own life values, that help drive all of my life decisions. In this respect, I was thinking more of what values am I looking for in a career change. And so I tried to think of, roughly a handful of career values that were important to me. And so at the time, I had 2 little kids. My husband was a stay-at-home dad, and we had a young family. We still have a young family, and we are trying to navigate how does a career change impact our family life, which is really important. And so ultimately, I sat down and tried to think through what are things I need in my career that's going to support my personal values, and how do I translate that into work values. And so I came up with that list, and that's what really helped me to think through the different companies I was interviewing with. And eventually I was lucky enough to actually have 2 really great offers to consider. And it was at first a hard choice of which one do I pick? How do I know I make the right choice? And going back to that list of career values I had created really helped me kind of walk through methodically and pick one over the other, which for me, I've been in my new position for 2 years now, and I love it. So it was a really successful process to work through all 3 of those steps.
Yeah. I mean, for you, Amy, you've got something that most people don't have, which is the behavioral financial advisor designation. And you write in the article that it helped you identify your values. For folks who may not have that designation, what do you recommend that they do to sort of uncover the values that they are at their core?
Yeah, great question. So there actually is an online tool people can use. It's through a company called Think to Perform. And if you Google values card deck or values card exercise, it'll pull it up and there's a digital deck of cards that you can work through. This is an exercise I did when I did the behavioral financial advisor coursework, but it's a digital deck of cards that helps you identify your core values as a person. So I think that's a really great starting point. It's a free tool you can use, but above and beyond that, I think just taking some time to think about you and think about your life, think about your goals, think about what's important to you, and just jot down whatever comes to mind. I think some of the things I learned in the coursework was you need to have a narrow focus somewhat. You can't have 20 values because then it's really hard to hone in on any of it. But again, thinking about maybe a handful, 5 or 6 true values, true things that are important to you. If you go through that exercise or just make a list of what pops into your head and start thinking about that with every decision you have to make, it does help give you some focus.
Yeah. So one other question, we live in a unique time. My father pretty much had one job for all his life. I've had several, and I think my children will have even more than I had. So these career transitions might come fast and furious in a young person's career. Any thoughts about how to approach the many jobs and careers that young people might have over the course of their lives?
Yeah, you're right. I have read a lot about that trend. There is no more of that whole stay someplace until you retire. It still exists, but few and far between now. But I think it just comes down to being true to yourself, really thinking through the 3 steps we just talked about and trying to think longer term instead of kind of that instant gratification of what do you need now. But I think when people think long term, it helps them come up with a plan and a path to follow. And it may mean that still they do need to bounce around. You can get a lot of good experience with all of those different, paths that you take, the different spots along the way. But yeah, I think that would be my best advice is really just think long term. Where do you want to be in 2 steps? Maybe even where do you want to be in 20 years, thinking down the line and then working backwards to help you figure out what's the best way to get there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of thinking about the long game. So anything that we haven't touched upon that you want to make mention of before we wrap up?
No, I think those are the important things that helped me, and I think it all just comes down to always thinking about what really makes people happy, rather than thinking about only the money. We didn't talk about that a lot, or I didn't really write about it in my article, but of course, financial considerations are always important ones, but I do think that those have to be weighed with the values type decisions first, because
Yeah.
I think we've all heard stories of people making millions of dollars that aren't happy, and so the money shouldn't be the true driving force when you're looking for a career change. It should really be what brings you that emotional satisfaction.
Well, Amy, as always, thanks for sharing your advice, your knowledge, your wisdom. It's greatly appreciated.
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Bob.